So many years ago, when I was practicing in DC Superior Court, I specialized in representing youth who were accused of crime, most often in juvenile court. And I had the occasion to watch a hearing of a friend of mine. It wasn't my hearing. It was a hearing of a friend of mine who is another Black woman attorney. The prosecutor in the case was a white woman who had children. And my friend's client was a young Black man. And his mother, who was allowed to be in the courtroom because it was a juvenile proceeding, was a Black woman who was a police officer. And I don't remember exactly what the young man was charged with. I remember that his mother it was clear that she was mortified that he was in court, that he had been charged in delinquency court. I can imagine her embarrassment. I mean, normally when parents are in juvenile court before a judge, normally they often feel embarrassment or shame at the fact that their child is system involved. But in this particular woman's case, where she's a police officer, I can imagine that was even more intense. And so at some point during the hearing, I believe it was a sentencing, and it was getting closer and closer and closer to the time when the judge was going to pronounce sentence. And it was pretty clear that the sentence wasn't going to be something like, probation with conditions and him being sort of released back into the community. It was going to be something more serious than that. Suddenly, he took off. He took off running. He ran out of the courtroom, quick as a flash. None of us really anticipated it. And so we all tried to regroup, right? Like he's gone. He's run through the double doors. The double doors are banging closed, and we're all kind of stunned. And then people run out after him. There was a marshal in the courtroom who ran outside after him, and so did his mother, and the prosecutor and the defense attorney followed behind. And meanwhile, he's running through the courtroom. Through the courthouse, right? He's like track star, like leaping over stuff, like he's running. And his mother, so people are yelling, stop him, and no one pays attention until his mother yells, stop him, he has a gun. And then everything stopped. Marshals who were at the front of the courthouse came rushing in, tackled him, subdued him. Of course, he didn't have a gun, right? He couldn't have gotten into the courthouse through the metal detectors with a gun. Of course, he didn't have a gun, but his mother knew that yelling that he had a gun would get everybody's attention and would get him stopped. And so we are walking back into the courtroom, because of course I ran out too. It wasn't my case, but I had to see what was going on. So we're of course all walking back into the courtroom, and I hear the defense attorney and the prosecutor arguing. The defense attorney is livid. She's so angry that his mother jeopardized him in this way, right? The prosecutor shoots out to her. She says, well, I understand why she did it. You don't know because you're not a parent. And the defense attorney said right back to her, and you don't understand because you are not Black. And I open with that story because it shows in so many ways the complexities of the issues around gun possession and race, and how those and the response of the criminal legal system, and how those issues intersect. It's extraordinarily complicated in many important ways, but the fact that we are all here convened today to examine this topic from so many different angles shows that there is at least a lot of social will, if not yet the political will. There's a lot of social will in really sort of applying all of our efforts to addressing the many dimensions of this problem. And so with that, I want to welcome you to the inaugural Bluhm Legal Clinic Symposium, which is part of our Race and the Lawyering in the 21st Century speaker series, where we plan to present over the next year a few opportunities with speakers and opportunities to spur discussion around race and lawyering issues that people in the clinic are particularly working on specifically over the course of this year. And so we're so pleased to be able to invite the public to join us today. The hundreds of registrants joining us in person and online include not only our students and other valued and important members of our law school community, but also students and teachers from other law schools, from other universities, and from high schools, people who have sustained unspeakable losses from gun violence, elected officials and other policymakers, social workers, court practitioners, and many others who work directly with people experiencing the impacts of both criminalization and gun violence. Again, the fact that we are all gathered together to examine this topic and to discuss this topic should be, or I hope, serves as a source of sort of hopefulness that the issues around, the complicated issues around gun possession, race, and the response of the criminal legal system are not intractable. So we want to welcome all of you, and we want to thank all of you for enriching today's discussion with your attention and with your questions for our experts today. And now, of course, this topic is of grave importance as Chicago is currently experiencing levels of gun violence not seen in decades. But what we have learned time and again, including from Chicago in the 1980s and 90s, is that the urgency of tragedy sometimes translates into policies, and sometimes those are policies that may be helpful, and other times they might be policies that are not always well thought out or that might even cause unforeseen harm. So now, when we are feeling urgency, is the perfect time to evaluate what we're doing and where our systems might be falling short and where we might be gaining ground. Now, of course, norms and practices around carrying handguns for the purposes of self-defense have changed significantly in recent years, but America's relationship to guns has always involved issues of race. This has certainly been true from the perspective of Indigenous people, and for Black Americans, while guns have been tools of rural and agricultural life, they've also been tools of subjugation from slavery through Reconstruction to Jim Crow. In law school, I took constitutional law with Derek Bell, who many of you may have heard of, who is just an extraordinary legal scholar and critical race theorist. And it was a real privilege to sit in class with him every week and hear him sort of opine on the Constitution. And the week that we talked about the Second Amendment, he said, look, everybody knows what you got to do to get gun control in this country. He said, you go to Harlem, you find 4 of the biggest, darkest skinned, most muscular Black men you can find. And you put sashes on them that say, I'm marching for my Second Amendment rights, and you give them like automatic weapons and just have them start marching across the country and see what happens. Straight from Derek Bell. But he's right. I think I heard somebody say he's right. Right. It's an important point. And so within the last 50 years, the histories of both gun rights and gun control groups have been intertwined and in tension with the growth of Black political power and the perceived unique threat of armed Black and Latino people during the so-called war on crime, right? of course, one of the most famous pictures of Malcolm X, the most sort of widely reproduced pictures of Malcolm X, is that picture of him where he's looking through his window and holding the rifle, right? Never mind all of the other things that he stood for. That's one of the most widely reproduced pictures of him. So we have much to discuss today. So I want to be sure to thank our speakers and our moderators for their efforts. And I want to thank the Children and Family Justice Center and the Community Justice and Civil Rights Clinics for organizing today's event. And I also want to make sure to draw your attention to the website that has been created to support this event. The link is IllinoisBlueprintForPeace.org. That's IL, Blueprint for Peace, all one word, .org. And at that site, you'll find the agenda, you'll find the bios for all of our speakers, you'll find how you can get CLE and CEU credit, you'll be able to give feedback about the event, you'll find out about the organizations that have organized the event and that are participating in it, and you'll be able to find out ways to learn more about this topic after we break for the day. So thank you again. We are so heartened to see you all here and all of you in online land too. And with that, I will turn it over to our first extraordinary and esteemed panel.